Good morning, everyone. I'm Arlo Miranda with Remax All Pro here with Jeanette Duarte. How you doing this week, Jeanette?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It was a good week. I had a lot of good questions that came from the gym that I did this week. A lot of some that I want to answer. Like always, we're gonna start the show updating you on the market. This week, we actually have more properties that came on the market. Last week it was 108. This week there was 205. So there's seven more. The medium sales price last week was 460. This week it rose 10,000 at 460,000. Days on the market, meaning to say, how long does it take to sell your house on average? In the Antelope Valley, it's at 42 days right now. We had 120 closed. There was 121 last week, so it's one less. We have active under contract 10. We have 12 that canceled. Back on the market, it's 51. Last week we had 47, so there's four more. This week we have 124 pending. Last week it was 108, so there is more pending. And this week we had 107 that changed price. Last week it was 87, so there's 20 more properties that changed price. Was there any changes to the interest rate this week, Jeanette?
Yeah, so actually, the commentary was just have a glass of wine and sit there, don't even look at the rates because they were going up, which is, kind of it's just nerve-wracking, frustrating, especially when you get a few offers that are accepted. And you can't lock the rates because we just got to kind of just write it out and hopefully that they'll make an adjustment. This week or as of today, the FHA rate was running about 6.875. And just a reminder, I'm running this on a $500,000 purchase price. With good credit, VA is running about 7%, and then conventional is running about 7.5. So comparing that to last week, FHA was 6.75, so just went up slightly. And then VA was at the 6.875 and went up to the 7. So once again, slight increase. Our conventional pretty much stayed the same at 7.5. So during midweek this week, we did see the rates go up higher. They did come down just a little bit, but still a little bit higher than where they were last week. So I wish we had better news on the rates, but it is what it is. And then we just keep going back to if it's the right time to buy, it's the right time to buy. Don't be so concerned with the rates because hopefully there will be a time down the road where we will be able to refinance you out.
Yes, I get that a lot. I made a little quick video last week, and my friend, he's like, "Hey, all he wants to talk about was the interest rates, interest rates, interest rates," and I'm like, "Hey, you're forgetting that they're letting you borrow money, number one, and number two, like when your house appreciates, they're not asking for that money back." And then I asked them, "Hey, if you were letting borrow someone 500,000. He's like, well, I wouldn't let no one borrow. I said, okay, so there we go. And I said, realistically, how much money would you want back? And he said, you know what? I'm gonna be honest with you. I would want 50% of my money back, and I would want some of that equity too. And I'm like, well, I think you got your answer. So I'm like, so you can't really look at it that way when you have that response. I tell him. So I tell him, you know what? At the end of the day, buying a home is an asset. Yeah, hopefully in 5, 10 years it does appreciate. But I try to tell people all the time, you're buying a home to buy a home to live in, that you want to be in, that you want to stay in. And yes, hopefully, if rates go down, you're able to refinance. Later down the road, in 5, 10 years, you have some equity, you have the chance to either do a cash out refinance or you can sell a home. But I told them, like, don't forget that buying a house is an asset, and it's a home. And I wanted to ask you something because I did get some interesting questions this weekend, and one of them was it's he had purchased a home VA, and he asked me how long do I need to wait to be able to buy another home.
Okay, so for the most part, almost all your loans are going to be the same. Your VA, FHA, and conventional. In that, if you're buying it as your primary residence, so I'm going to live in this house as my primary residence, which means I'm taking advantage of most likely a lower down payment and a better interest rate than if I purchase it as an investment property. So the lenders are almost for the most part going to follow the same guidelines. You should stay in that property for at least 12 months. And then you can go ahead and convert it to a rental and purchase a new property down the road. And when I say for the most part is because there's always the what ifs, there's always possible exceptions. There's always, it depends. And a good example of it depends could be, let's just say they purchased that property 6 months ago and they are VA, or even if it wasn't VA, and their job got moved, they got relocated. So let's just say somebody here in the Antelope Valley is working at Edwards Air Force Base, and they get restationed out to a base in another state, then they can convert that one. Now there's kind of an exception. They have a relocation of a job. We can get the employment offer letter in there. That's not a normal commute. They're needing to convert that to a rental to be able to purchase another one. So those are some of the exceptions. It has to be not considered a normal commute, meaning if his new job was transferred to, let's just say, Santa Clarita from Antelope Valley. What are we, 40 miles, maybe 35 miles? So that's considered a normal commute, and there wouldn't most likely be an exception made for that because you can commute that every day. So it's got to make sense for you not to wait that 12 months and being able to convert it to a rental prior to the 12 months.
Oh, and another question that they asked me was, how long if I the buyer, he had a conventional loan, and he goes, hey, I lived in my property for 2 years already. He's like, can I buy another home with a FHA loan? Because his main thing is like, if I have this house already, how can I avoid? Am I an investor? Can I avoid the 20% down? So that's what he asked me. So what do I need? So yeah, he has a conventional loan, 2 years, and he said, can I buy the new home with FHA?
Yeah, so FHA does have a rule that the new property does need to be 100 miles away from your current property. So if you're going to convert that one to a rental and purchase the FHA, then you should be 100 miles from the current property that you're purchasing.
100 miles away. Okay. And one of the things he said to me was about the down payment. Is it going to be if he had another conventional, um, does he have to put 20% down?
No, so on conventionals, we have as low as 3%, but you do have to be a first-time home buyer, meaning you can't have owned a property in the last 3 years in order to be classified as a first-time home buyer, putting 3% down. So then the next option would be 5%. You do not have to be a first-time home buyer to put 5% down. If he currently has a conventional and he's vacating that property and he's going to purchase the new one as his primary residence to live in, then he can put as low as 5% down. Of course, he'll have the PMI, which is the private mortgage insurance on there until he has the 20% equity. He does have to keep it on there for 2 years. And then once he has a 20% equity, he can submit a request to have it removed. They'll look at the property at that time to see if they can remove it. So no, they don't have to come in with 20% down. Now, if you're purchasing a house as an investment property, that's where you start to look at putting 15, 20, 25. And our current market with our current rates, the best is going to be probably a 25% down if you're purchasing investment, but you do not have to put 20% down if you're purchasing it as your primary.
And another question that I had, um, he had told me that he already owns a home and he renting it out, and he wanted to know how long, and oh, how long, wait a minute. Let me get the question right. Sorry. No, he asked, can he use that as income? So he's already renting the property. He's been renting it for 2 years. So he said, is he able to use that to purchase a new home?
So sorry, yes, if he's had it for 2 years and he's included on his tax return, he's going to have what's called a Schedule E, which is how the tax filing will be prepared on a form for rental income. We look at that rental income and we do a 2-year average, and that's what we use to offset his current payment. So let's just say he has an offset of 1,500 that he's getting from the rental income, but his monthly mortgage payment is 2,000, then he'll have a negative of 500, but he won't get hit with the full 2,000 because we're offsetting it with the income that he's getting. You don't get 100%. So just because he's renting it out for 2,000, you don't get 2,000. It depends on how it was written off on the tax return. So normally the tax preparer is going to put the rents received and then have all of the deductions there, right? Because sometimes they do repairs to the property, different things. So they'll minus all of those out and then give a net rental value. And that's what we're going to use as the average to offset the monthly payment.
Oh, okay. And another one person asked me, he said, "Hey, he said I have equity in my home," and I asked him, do you have asked you how much?" He said, "Yeah, I have about 180,000." I'm like, "Okay, that's great, that's great." And he said, "So what I can I use that as a down payment for a house?" And he goes, "How would that work? Do I have to pull the money out? And is that even possible?"
Yes, so a few different things with that. So yes, if he has 180,000, you want to be, or you need to keep about 20% of the equity in the property. That would be the same as like not having the PMI, right? So we got to keep 20% of that equity in the property, which if you do 20% of 180, that's going to leave you with about 144,000 in equity that he could pull out. Two options. You're going to either one, do a cash out refinance to take that equity out, or two, you're going to leave your loan as is and do a home equity line of credit to pull that money out. Then you'll be able to use that money as the down payment for the new purchase. A couple things to consider. Just because the equity is there doesn't mean you can pull it out. As a lender, we're still going to look at credit. We're going to look at liabilities. We're going to look at debt to income. So even though you have this 144,000 you can pull out, if your debt to income ratios are too high, then you're not going to be able to pull it out, because we have to consider when you take this 144, you're going to have a new mortgage payment on this, whether it's a home equity line of credit, which will be a second loan, or you're going to do a cash out refinance, which means your monthly mortgage payment most likely is going to increase because now you have another 144,000 on top of your original balance. So we have to make sure, does that new loan fall into the debt to income ratios to allow you to pull it out? And then here's the tricky part. It's going back to primary residence and investment property. So if this is your primary residence that you're taking the money out from, and you're looking to take the money out and buy a new primary residence, then that cash out refinance actually has to be done as an investment property, which means you're going to have a higher interest rate because it's a cash out on an investment. And the reason you have to do that is because it goes back to that same thing we kind of just talked about. If you purchased a home, really you should be living in it for 12 months as a primary residence. So if we do a cash out refinance it on a primary residence, then you can't buy another primary residence. You'd have to keep this one for 12 months. So you'd be buying an investment property. Otherwise,
Mm.
we would do the cash out refi as investment. So that way we know this one's going to become an investment that you're going to vacate. And the new one's going to be the primary residence. And that one's going to have the lower interest rate.
Yes, and a lot of the questions that I always get, and it's always in my head. I'm like, everyone asks me lender questions. And I tell people, I'm a realtor. I could answer to the best of my abilities, but we said this in the prior show, and I said, but look, I work with Jeanette Duarte. I'm gonna have her give you a call. Oh, no, 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 it's fine, it's fine. I just tell me whatever you think you know. And I'm like, well, I don't want to lie to you, and I do not want to be accurate. But it never fails. Everyone always asks me lender questions. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, why don't you ask me property questions, right? Something about a house. But no, it's always something, it's always a lender question. It never fails. And he did ask me about the debt to income ratio. He told me that he makes about it was between 70, like between 7,000 and 7,000 and 8,000. So he asked me, how does debt to income ratio work? He's like, I have a car payment that I pay. And then he goes, and then he said, so how much of my income needs to be free?
So it depends on the loan type. So you're going to hear us, just to kind of take a step back, as lenders, we say DTI, which is debt to income, right? So we'll call it DTI, we call it debt to income. And what that is we take your monthly income that you're receiving. So let's just say he is bringing in 7,000 a month and not bringing in, we take the gross. So we take whatever they make prior to any deduction. So let's just assume 7,000 is his gross. And depending on the new loan type that he's going to do for the new purchase is going to depend on the debt to income. So let's just say we're going to do an FHA loan. FHA actually allows you to go up to a 56% debt to income. Now, doesn't mean we're going to get approval at 56%. It just, they allow it. So if you had that perfect cookie cutter borrower, 800 credit scores, long length on their job, great, very little liabilities, have a longer established history, credit history, we could probably get approval at 56% if they have some assets in their reserves of their bank account. So this is that perfect cookie cutter A+ borrower, which we don't get all the time. If we had that, we could probably go up to the 56. So if we take a step back and let's just say we go up to 55, just to kind of give an example. If we take 7,000 and we do 55% of his income, that's going to allow for monthly liabilities of $3,850. That's total liabilities in order for him to qualify at the 55%. So what that takes into account is any existing liabilities that he has. Like you said, if he has a car payment, let's just say his car payment is $400 a month. Then that leaves us with $3,450 that can be used for the monthly mortgage. Now, if he had credit cards, if he had child support, if he had alimony, if he has money that he has to send on a regular payment to the IRS, all of that's going to come from that remaining $3,450 that's allowed to keep him underneath that 55% debt to income. So that's what would be what's left for the monthly mortgage payment. Now, if we go to a conventional loans for the most part, unless once again it's super A paper client, is going to be about a 45% debt to income. So you can see on doing a conventional now, we have less income monthly to work with. And then VA is supposed to be about 41%. Now, if we get DU approval, which is the desktop underwriter, which is our automated approval, then we can go up higher. I have a client right now with 760 credit scores, and we got approval at 54% debt to income on a VA because we got automated approval. If we had to manually underwrite that loan file for any reason, we would be back down to 41. So it just depends on the loan type that we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, and another thing that I'm getting a lot apart from interest rates is people are starting to ask me a lot about ADUs. And one question that the guy asked me, he's like, "Hey, I already have my house." He said, can I finance an ADU like you do a house? Have you come across any ADUs?"
So you don't finance an ADU like you would a normal house. You can only finance a primary residence. However, you can take out financing to build an ADU, which would be a cash out refi, which would be a HELOC. So you're taking equity out of your current property to then go and build an ADU on your current property. But it's not like you can go and do, I can't do an FHA loan for an ADU. You're just going to
Okay.
take out equity on your property to do that ADU, or you're going to go to a bank and say, hey, I need a personal loan for whatever amount of money. I want a personal loan for $70,000 because I'm going to build this thing. And then once it's built and it has all its permits, now the property is actually worth more, right? So once it's built, then we could look at refinancing and capturing it all in there because now the property is worth more. So we could do what's called like a cash out refi. We're going to do an appraisal on the property. The house is worth more now because it has the ADU, and then they pull out money to pay off that personal loan that they took out to build the ADU.
So that guy that has like that guy, for instance, that told me that he has 180, he can actually pull that out to build an ADU in the back.
Correct, as long as it allows. So for the most part, for California, the laws were changed recently. I think it was last year that allows for ADUs. And for the most part, I think it's 2 ADUs per property. However, you always have to look at size of property, and zoning. So just because that was rolled out doesn't mean that in my backyard that I can fit two ADUs, or that the city is going to allow two ADUs on my lot. So you have to look at that. Some lots have to be a certain size to have so many units on there.
Okay, yeah, because that's what and one of the things that they did ask me is if I have this guy had two ADUs and I when I did the booth at Crunch this weekend, they asked me questions that have not been asked. And when people ask me questions that I don't know, I kind of get excited because it always lets me know that I have more to study, more to learn. So when I get off guard, I really like it, and I really, it's good to know. And he said, "Hey, I have two ADUs on my property." He said, "And my square footage of the house is 2,200." And I asked him, "Well, what are the spaces of your ADUs?" He goes, one is about 1,000, and the other is 800." So he goes, "So does that make my total square footage of the house?" So if it was 2,200, one was 800. He goes, "Does that put my square footage up to 4,000?"
So what's going to happen is as long as they're permitted, when the appraiser does the appraisal, they're going to give value for each of the units. So they're going to give a value for the main house, and then they're going to give a value for each of the units based on their square footage and the living area and what it has and the structure and how it's built. They're going to give value to that. So you as a realtor, if you were to sell this house, you're going to do the same thing, right? You're going to comp it out on, okay, we have a front house with this, a main house, and then we have two ADUs with this square footage, both permitted. So then you're going to sell it with the total value of everything, right? And that's what an appraiser is going to do as well. Now, if they're not permitted, then no value is given, because really the structure is worth nothing if it's not permitted. So it's got to go through all the proper steps within the city or the county, wherever they're at, to get it fully permitted in order for an appraiser to give it value. Otherwise, it's just more of an accessory for a unit or for a home, makes it more appealing to people. So you're going to get it sold, but you're not getting value for it. That seller is not getting value for that property.
Yes, and I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question, but he did ask me something on the way out. He's like, "Hey, do you think it's possible for me to sell my ADU to somebody else?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have an ADU in the back. You think is there any way I can sell it?" I'm like, "So you meaning to say like that's their ADU on your property?" I'm like, "Is that possible?" Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Yeah, so you would not be able to unless it has its own parcel, right? So certain land, like
Uh-huh.
let's just say it's a 2 acre lot, and they went through the proper channels of getting it legally split with the county. So then it received its own APN number, which is the identifier for that piece of land. If they went through the whole proper channels and actually split off, and that ADU is on its own separate parcel, then you could possibly sell that ADU with that piece of land. And where you have to be careful, and this is probably why he kept it at the 800, is because there's minimums for square footages on loans, right? So I think FHA, I don't hold me to this because I haven't done it in a while, but I think it's about 600. So the minimum lending on a structure is about 600. But where we run into problems is sometimes when the square footage is that low, then the land a lot of times is worth more than the actual structure of the house, which then it's hard to comp out, because when we do a loan on that, the appraiser has to be able to find like comparables. So is he going to be able to find two other comparables that have a 600 square foot house on, let's say, a 1 acre lot? Probably not, because most people are going to build a bigger unit than 800 square feet on a 1 acre lot, right? So that's the only thing,
Yeah.
is when you go to resell it, he can sell it if somebody's willing to buy it, but then when that person goes to resell it, are they going to be able to do a loan on it? Most likely, if that person bought it from him, if he truly has it split, may have a hard time getting financing on it, just because it's going to be hard for an appraiser to find like comparables.
Yes, and then when I did ask him, because when I did ask him about the ADU, I asked him, "Hey, do you have any permits on it?" And he kind of stood quiet, and I'm like, I'm like, it's okay, I need to know this question, and I'm not sure if you have the answer. And he's like, honestly, I know. And I'm like, he's like, okay, like it's a detached garage. I did all the plumbing, I did all electrical, and he said, so what? He said, so what do I do in my situation? He's like, can I get permits if it's already done? What would I have to do to convert it? He goes, what I have to tear it down, what I have to take it apart and redo it again. Do you know how that would work?
So that, I mean, I would direct him because you and I are not, that's not our field now, right? That starts to become legal issues. I would direct him whether if the property is within a city limit, then they need to go to their city and find out. If it's within the county, then they need to go to the county. My 2 cents and feeling of it is the minute they go to inquire about it, though, they're bringing it up to them that it's not permitted. And from what I've heard in the past, they truly can make you, they can one, fine you for building it and not getting the permits. Two, they can make you tear down the structure for health and safety if it's not up to code, and especially if they know you have people living in it that you're renting it out, you could be fined for it. So it's kind of one of those catches that they're basically making the city or county aware of that they built the structure and they don't know the safety of it. And I don't know if the city or county would allow them to maybe tear down pieces of it because they have to go in and see, right? When you build anything, they want to see the stages of the electrical, the foundation, all of that, because for health and safety, that's everybody's concern is if somebody's going to be living in that property, it should be of sound structure to make sure if anything were to happen, that the people aren't going to be hurt by it.
Yeah, my response to him was, you know what? I told him, hey, if you did that illegally, I was like, you have to go to the city. And I said, maybe you should look for a lawyer. I said, someone that does real estate lawyer. I said, because honestly, I can't answer that question. I said, the only thing I said moving forward, because he wanted to build another one. And I said, well, okay. Well, I said, well, the most important thing is not to make the same mistake. I was like, I would try to get permits on it and then go about it that way. But I really had some interesting questions this week, certainly ones that I could not answer. And it always goes back to, hey, why don't you speak to a lender? And they get so scared. And I'm like, calm down. You don't pay for the consultation. It's all free. I said the questions that you have there, you need to speak to a lender. But it never fails that they always get so scared. Like they don't it's like, no, 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 no. And I'm saying, no, it's okay, relax, calm down. And to ask you one final question, um, they asked me about credit score, and they said I have a credit score at 620, and he said one's like at 590 and one's like at 600. So he said, how does that work? Like, what score do they use, and do they use all three?
So when we run for a loan, we run a credit report that's called a tri-merge, which is going to bring in all three bureaus. And for all lending types, whether you're going conventional FHA or VA or even USDA, we're required to use the lowest middle score of everybody on the loan. So let's just say it was him only, and his scores were the 620, 590, and 602. Then we would be using the middle score of 602 because 590 would be his middle score, 620 would be his high score. If we had a co-borrower on there, or even multiple, sometimes we have 3 and 4 people on there, we line up all their scores, we get everybody's middle score, and whoever has the lowest of all of the middle scores, that's the score that we're going to use. So it's different from when you buy a car. When you go apply for a car, normally they pull from one bureau only and they use that score. But for lending, we have to use the middle of the lowest middle of whoever's on there. Now, let's just say they only have two. Sometimes we have that where people only have maybe an Experian and a TransUnion, but they don't have an Equifax. Well, then we're going to use the lower of the two because there's no middle score. So we're just going to go with whatever the lower one is of their two scores, and that's what we're going to use.
Okay, and I want to ask you one last question because this is something that I get. People ask me how many people can go to a loan because I've had one person in the gym say, "Hey, it's my mom, my dad, me, sister, and brother." I said 5 people, and I said, "Good question." I said, "I'll find out for you." So now I know I'm going to see the person later today. So what is there a limit to how many people can be on the loan?
So that I don't have the top of my head. I'll have to get back to you. I know, I want to say it's about six, and of course it depends on the loan type. So each loan has their own set of guidelines, and usually it's about six people to a loan that could actually be on there.
Okay, and what's the most that you've ever done on the loan?
So the most I've done is, I think it's four or five. And the toughest
Okay.
part is when they all have kind of the same name, like, it's dad and son and they have the same first and last names. And then some of the other people, like it's tough when everybody has pretty similar names that you're putting on there.
Okay, and sorry for the movement of the camera. I actually have my bulldog that keeps like getting at my leg here. And he keeps just pulling. It's just sorry about that. No, but that's what I wanted to ask you. Because I did get these questions this week when I did the booth there at Crunch, and um, I usually do the booth with my cousin Oscar Duarte from Remax All Pro. That's my mentor, and I'm like, if only Oscar was here. I tell myself this weekend, but it never fails. I remember that something that Oscar tells me is like, if you don't know the answer to something, it's okay. The best thing you can do as a realtor is say, hey, you know what? That's a great question. Definitely get back to you if you give me some time. But
Yeah.
definitely the questions keep coming, and the more I speak with people, the more that I'm getting questions that I have not gotten before. So definitely that's something that I do like doing. So as I do the show, the questions that are coming up and all the questions that I ask are actually questions that people ask me. And so that's why I kind of want to create the show, because I do see that a lot of people have a lot of questions that they need answers to. And some of them, me myself, I cannot answer them myself. So that's why I like doing the show with you, because I know that you're really knowledgeable and you know what you're talking about, and you've been in the business for a very long time.
Good. Yeah. No, and it's always good. It helps you, it helps myself, right? Because these are the questions that we don't get every day. But they are out there. So it does help you get to know, the industry a little bit more, even on the lending side. And then it always makes me go back and research, right? Because you get these questions every now and then, like the whole how many people can be on one loan. We don't get that every day. We don't get that every year. Like it very rarely pops up, but it does come up every now and then. So it's good to always
But
have those questions.
yeah, and when people know that I'm a realtor, it never fails. They're not gonna ask me anything up front. But the next 3 days, hey, you know what? I have a question for you. And they come rapid fire, like, okay. So it lets me know that they've had these questions. And for some reason, like people are scared to ask me questions because they think like they're gonna like I'm gonna charge them or something like that. Or like, no, no. And I try to tell people like all the information is free. You don't have to worry about anything. We're here to answer your questions. And I tell people like I'm not I'm not like we're not salesmen in that way. We're like, hey, we charge you for actually no, like we're everything is free. All the information you want to know is free. When I say, hey, speak to Janet Duarte, all the information is free. But it never fails. People always I say, hey, my name's Aura Miranda, Remax Oppo, great. The next day, 2 days later, hey, you know what? I have a question to ask you. Okay. And it never fails. It's always interest rates, and interest rates. And then they ask me about, and now they're starting to ask me a lot about ADUs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
that's
good.
the end of our show. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Marlon Miranda with Remax All Pro.
And Jeanette with Mountain West Financial.
Thank you very much for joining us.